right, Northeast welcome back to the Q Source podcast. This week in the house, I've got Jim Thompson, Gilmore. Gilmore, thanks for coming on the Q Source podcast.
Absolutely, Money Pit. Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, so this week it's Q 1.6 Shorties. As you guys know, every week I try to interview someone who lives the chapter, who embodies the chapter. And Jim, I've just loved watching you be a dad. For those of you who maybe are new to our community, before Gilmore's son, Nelson, went to college, Jack worked out with us. He was there all the time, as much as his dad was. And so we got to watch you be a dad, Gilmore. And, I didn't tell you this before, but you just have inspired me as I've seen you be a dad and watch you send your son off, just when he was around and when he wasn't around, just how proud you are of him, how you are proud to brag on him in front of the group. When he did something well or was accepted to school, like you were quick to share that with us, and made me think, gosh, I don't know if I think that about my kids, but am I so proud that I want to share it with other people? So just inspired to see you. Such an awesome dad. You're an inspiration to us. So glad that you would talk about Shorties.
Absolutely. Glad to,
so
man.
how many kids? So we know Jack, but he's not your only child. So how many kids do you have?
Yeah, I've got two kids. So like you said, Jack, he's 22. And then I've got a daughter who is, she's 18 and about to graduate from high school here shortly and going to UNCG in the fall. So actually about to be empty nesters, man, which is kind of crazy. Well, could get a focus on the M thing that we talked about last week.
Yeah, focus on the M thing a little bit more. Well, tell us, you shared so much with me when we were just chatting, but, share some of the secret sauce as you think about how you've been a great dad, and it probably has come natural to you, but maybe it doesn't come natural to all of us. And just would love to hear just a couple thoughts on being a dad, the way you live your life with your kids, and then I have some more pointed questions that we can get into.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think obviously I think with everybody, it started out with, who they were raised by. And, my parents both divorced, and while I didn't get to spend a lot of time with my dad as I wanted to, I was always impressed with his commitment to us as his kids. And so, when I eventually had children, I wanted to make sure that I was as present as possible in any way I could. I mean, whether it was just, volunteering in the classroom. I mean, it was kind of interesting. And you can see this in whether it's, reading to your kids' school or going on the field trips or, taking them to soccer games. Like, it was always interesting how I felt sometimes I was one of the only dads at the field trips. It seemed like it felt like that was the kind of things that were reserved for the moms to do. And I'm like, no, I drove my daughter to preschool every day. I was I was that dad that was just always in everything, just because I saw it in my dad. And, while, obviously I'm fortunate, I never had to go through the divorce situation with me personally as a dad and a husband. So, I just always made sure I never missed those opportunities. I mean, because you just know you're not going to get them back. I mean, my dad, while it's kind of sad. I mean, I remember high school graduation, him making some comment, he was very sad and he was crying and he was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's over. This is it. You're graduating from high school, you're going to go to college and I'm not going to be able to, and he was like, I wish I could have it all back. It's just God, and I didn't want to ever be in that moment of man, I wish I'd had more time. Cause there's very few regrets I have with my kids in terms of things that dang, I wish I would have done that.
Man, no wonder your son loves to come work out with you. He's not just coming to work out, he's coming to work out with dad, and he quickly assimilated. I'm sure his buddies, Absolutely. I don't see his buddies out there working with him or working out with him. He comes because dad's there. And so, that didn't start when his first day of the workout, that his relationship with you started, that started years before he ever decided to come work out with you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and while y'all don't get to see this relationship, my daughter and I have just it's a different relationship. I mean, just because it's kind of funny. I always joke about your parents always tell you, you just wait. One of these days, you're going to get a kid that's going to grow up and be just like you, and you're going to get payback. And, of course,
Yeah.
Nelson was born, and like 6 months later, I'm like, this is actually not that bad. Like, man, he doesn't seem to be that crazy. I'm like, and then she was born, and I'm
Mhm.
like, dang, it's me, but in a female form. Like, holy crap. I mean, like we butt heads on some things just because we have such a very similar personalities.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, but we have our daddy daughter time where we just sit on the back porch sometimes and just talk about life. And when people used to always talk about how like, oh my gosh, the teenage years for girls, it's like one of the worst things ever. I'm like, I never really experienced that. I mean, she tells me things that, you know, are deep. Like we have some deep conversation. And it's because of that relationship we build of trust that she feels comfortable sharing with me things that, that she's, thought about hurting herself or, really, going through some changes, some identity things, some,
Hmm.
some yeah, just life things,
Yeah, right.
you
Life
know.
things.
Yeah, but
Well,
knowing that she's okay with sharing those with me, I think that's like if dang, if that's not a sign of a dad who's like, you're all right. Like you've done pretty good if that's the case.
there's probably some guys who are thinking right now, what is the secret to that? What's the trick? They may not have that relationship or want that. I mean, I would guess, and I'd love to hear you expound on this and share anything else. I would guess it has something to do with the way you live your life around them and how they see you live your life and the amount of
Absolutely.
not only authenticity but honesty you have with them. Because you shared with me,
Yeah.
you share a lot of stuff with them. You're not trying to hide your life from
Yeah.
your kids.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's kind of interesting because like I remember that growing up, like I don't even think honestly ever, like I don't think my dad ever like told me like how much he made. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he never expressed that or told me that he was interviewing for a job somewhere or was thinking about making a career change or like nothing. Like, I don't ever remember him having those. It was a very surface level thing. It was just like, you're just my dad. And that was it. I mean, I never heard about the struggles or really, I mean, I could kind of see some of them obviously being a divorced kid and seeing that side of things. But like with my kids, I mean, I've been very transparent about, yeah, I mean, I failed my first senior year in high school and had to repeat and da 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 da. And I've like, interviewed for jobs and didn't get them. And, I mean, and this is how much money I make. And, yeah, we've sat down and been like, yeah, you and your mom and I, there was a time during the pandemic where, I wasn't traveling very much and I used to travel a lot and there were some tensions in the house and, my wife and I recognized we probably need to get some help. We probably should talk to somebody. And so we were very
Mm-hmm.
clear that like, hey, your mom and I are, going to our therapy appointment today, or whatever. Like, it's like they need to know that we struggle too as parents. Like, I don't always have the right answers. I mean, like, I just don't. I'm not
And
perfect. I don't
and
have
so
the,
you
you know,
opening up your heart to them, do you think that's what's made it easy for them to be willing to share what they're going through with you?
I think so. Cause I think they realize that, I mean, cause you think about it, if, um, I don't know, like anybody you look up to, I think if you see them being authentic and who they are and knowing that, they struggle. I mean, you think about it, how many, I mean, we're guys, we love those cool sports movies of the guy who's like, got cut from all the different
Yeah.
teams and then, then finally like worked really hard and made it to, I mean, like the Michael Jordan story of,
Yeah.
like, he got cut by his coach and he worked really hard and ended up making the team, becoming obviously Michael Jordan, so everybody loves those comeback stories. And I think for our kids to be able to see an actual real world example of, it's not just these famous people that have had these struggles. Like even my own dad has struggled with things, but has overcome them,
Mm-hmm.
and that failure doesn't always have to, in your past, like we said on the call earlier, like, your past never, ever has to define who you are,
Mm-hmm.
ever.
Mm-hmm. So, so the third F is faith, right? And
Yep.
we were talking earlier. I mean, being a dad is there's such an intense spiritual component to that, regardless of what your
Mhm.
faith is. But I know that that's important to you. I mean, how does being a father impact your faith, and how's your faith impact being your fathering?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a great question. I mean, you think about, as somebody who, kind of grew up in the faith, but then sort of, lost his way in high school and college, and then ultimately, got it back once I decided that, I wanted to get married and I wanted to raise children, that, I wanted to make sure that my kids grew up in a home that, that we went to church. We well, not just went to church, but practice our faith
Yeah.
regularly, visibly. Um, but it didn't really hit me, I guess, about being a dad as much until a buddy of mine was also a Christian who I worked with. I was mentioning, I shared with him that we were having, our first kid, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, this is great. This is going to be one of the strongest things that's you will ever experience to build your faith." And I just didn't. I'm like, what do you mean by that?" And he's like, "Well, I mean, you're about to become a dad. I mean, and you think about you will truly now be able to understand about the sacrifice that God made and
Right.
sacrificing his son for us. I mean, now that you're a parent, you get that, and so, and he was like, we kind of talking. He was like, "Yeah, you think about it. You asked the question of like, all right, Jim, like, if God were to come to you today and say, 'Hey, I will eradicate cancer from the face of the earth,' would you sacrifice Jack Jack?" I mean, it's not even like one of those things you have to pause and like, well, no,
Mm-mm.
no, hell no, like absolutely not.
No.
No, I mean, you can take my dog before you take my kid, but like, no, absolutely not. So it's just,
Yeah.
it's one of
You're in
those
my
things
house,
like,
you're in my car, give me a thousand
yeah,
dollars, sure.
whatever,
Take my
whatever, but
kid? No.
absolutely not. I don't care what the price that I would be
Yeah.
paying, but he paid that price. Like, and
Yeah.
Jesus didn't even do anything. Like, I
Mm.
mean, he just happened to be the son of God, and he made that sacrifice, and God put him in that position to do that. And so, like, it just makes you think how, like, God, like, what a great God that is, like,
Yeah.
that would do something that amazing. And when you think about, does God have grace? Absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
how could a God that would do something like that not? Because I mean, he saved us. Like,
Yeah.
he loves us. Like, he loves us more than his own son. Like,
Yeah.
because he did that. I mean, so it's like, anyway, it just made me realize, like, from a faith perspective, was like, holy cow, I'm worshiping a pretty amazing God. Like,
Yeah.
pretty like,
I remember when my oldest was born, and I just remember that just in the newness of it, you start to have these just the overwhelming feeling of love like you've never felt before
oh my
for me.
gosh.
You're right, just
Mhm.
down to your soul. And I just really felt like God spoke to my heart. Now you're beginning to feel how I feel about you.
Right?
And it's been
Right? That
really
agape
incredible.
love that's just
Yes.
unconditional. Like,
Oh,
just
unconditional. And I know being a dad, God has really fathered me as I've been a man fathering my kids. It's
hmm
like filling in the gaps of what I missed as a kid as
right,
I've, fathered my kids. Um, well, this is a course on leadership, right? And so
right,
I don't want to miss that. And so, I think I love the way throughout Q1, Dread is weaving this concept that leadership starts at home, right? It
right,
starts on the inside, goes out to your M, to your shorties, continues to radiate out through your
right.
concentrica. And so, we've been, I think, continuing to share so far the stories of how we lead at home, but I really believe that how we parent and our relationship with our kids also affects our leadership outside the home. What would you say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I mean, 100%. I mean, I think it's I liken this example to, and it may not necessarily be me, but it's like living through my kids. Like, both of my kids, when I've encountered, like, my daughter's going through the Wake Forest Youth Leadership Program, and I can't tell you how many people have come up to me in the last, I don't know, a few months that she's been going through this program, and they were like, "I am so impressed at her ability to talk to adults."
Well,
It's like you don't see a lot of teenagers who are that comfortable
yeah,
just talking around adults. And it's like, but I think a lot of it has to do with, that in my leadership style, and then the people that I'm around, I've never treated them as like sort of second class citizens. Like, they're just my kid. Like, I bring them, when I, as an association professional, obviously I go to a lot of different meetings and events, and I've always brought my kids around with me so that they can see me interacting and how I interact with, whether it's my members or the general public. I mean, when I was on the board of commissioners, I mean, I took the kids to, all the events that I would typically go to as a commissioner, just because I wanted them to see that interaction and I wanted them to become comfortable being around adults because I know it's important, especially as they got older. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's, that for them to see like my leadership style as, an example of things to follow, I think it's helpful. It's been really helpful, I think. And
Yeah.
those, for Jack too. I mean, obviously, I think.
Well, and what we can't forget is, I mean, your life, anyone listening, is more well known than you know. Like people are watching you.
Hmm.
No matter how private you want to be, people are watching you.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
have I have on my screen on my phone is a picture of my family, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Yep.
anytime I call someone, I didn't realize this, but this pops up, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I had a couple of prospects and clients tell me recently, I love it when you call and I see your family. And one
Oh,
guy even said, "Is this a marketing ploy? Like, are you trying to manipulate me?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Every time I see your family, I trust you even more." And I was like,
that's
"Wow, it
interesting.
wasn't my intent, right?" But the point is like how you lead your family is also impacting how people perceive you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You
No,
know, and
I completely agree with that. Well, but
and
kind of going back to your other point, though, it's like, your children are that example. Like,
yeah,
so the lives that they ultimately, the things that they ultimately become, no matter how far away they are from you, is their lives are indicative of you as a person and as a
yeah,
leader, both externally and internally. Like, I mean, because they, like you said, like they see me in my work environment, and if my daughter came home and I was like yelling at one of my teammates like on the phone, like during a meeting or something, like she would, that would just be one of those things that would just surprise the heck out of her. Cause, like, I mean, it wouldn't happen, but I mean, but she would know like that's not dad's leadership style. Like that's not him. Like
right.
he
Now flip
rarely gets
this.
angry.
What if one of your coworkers came home and saw you screaming at your kid?
Right. Same thing.
Right,
Same thing.
same
Like,
thing.
yeah, because it just doesn't happen. I mean, I'm not gonna say I've never yelled at my kid by all means,
Oh, I
but
know, right.
but on the regular, absolutely not. I mean, you know.
And I just think, similar to our relationships with our wives, like when something's not right between one of my kids and me, I'm just
Hmm.
not right.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
I'm off, and
Absolutely.
it weighs on me when I have that when something's unreconciled with one of those really close relationships, whether it's my wife or it's my, kids, especially. And you can reconcile them, at least I'm able to relatively quickly, but if I leave the house and we're on bad terms because maybe one of my kids screwed up or I've had to discipline them, like it doesn't
Hmm.
give me any joy. And normally I walk out of the house feeling not great because they're in trouble. I don't
Right.
want them to be
Right.
in trouble, right? And that impacts my ability to be a leader to my team and serve my
Hmm.
clients.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's that thing about, you always hear the phrase like, in a relationship, especially with your like don't go to bed angry, fix it, resolve issues, don't sleep on those things. And I have honestly, been guilty of that a few times with my daughter, where, again, we have such similar personalities and we will clash sometimes. And there's been a few times where, we both got angry at each other and we both kind of went to bed angry. But especially as of late, I would say probably in the last, I don't know, year or two, um, I've tried to be really cognizant of that if we do have some sort of conflict, that, I try to resolve it really quick. And I've learned, even though it's as difficult as hell, like to really understand like when I have failed and like I'm wrong, like I made a mistake. I didn't handle that situation well.
Yeah,
So it's like even though you may be you may have a daughter that's 18 years old and you think, well, I've got this parenting thing figured out. Sometimes you don't. And it's okay. Like, I mean, there's not that perfect, nobody has that perfect playbook of
right.
how this is supposed to go. I mean, you learn from things, but I think you know, if you love your kids, you will, you'll resolve those things because you just know it's not, you're damaging them in the long
Yeah.
run. So
Well,
anyway,
as I would love for you to give me in 30 seconds some parting advice. See, I've got kids of all ages, right? I've got a
right.
14-year-old, so I'm watching you. I'm listening closely about how you parent your son and your daughter. But I've got a 1-year-old, so I got a long way to
Right.
go, right? And
Right.
there's moments, whether you're a PAX that's got a 1-year-old like me, or you're a PAX that's got a teenager, or sending someone off to college, right?
Yeah.
Like what in just a quick parting advice, what parting advice would you give us to lead our families well?
Sure. I mean, I think it, like we were talking a little bit earlier. I think it all goes back to just be your authentic self. I mean, realize that, you're not perfect. You're going to make mistakes along the way. And I think, as long as you're, and again, it's kind of different in my kids because sadly enough, like I almost don't even remember what it was like to be, but like when they're like 5 or 6 years old. But I think it's being authentic and just being present. I mean, just being a part of their lives is in any way you can. And if you have multiple kids, taking those opportunities to like spend time with each one of them one on one. I mean, yeah, sure, it's fun to take all the kids to the park one day and stuff like that, but it's really special when you take them out of their element and do something just for them individually and get to know them as a person because
Yeah.
your kids are your kids, but at the same time they're an individual too, and they need to know that like you want to get to know them on a personal level, just you too. Whether it's taking your daughter out to tea, at the tea room or something, or going to the cat cafe and hanging out with the cats, whatever, yeah, whatever it is that like she's like cool at that age, just being that one on time with her. Or again, you got a 12-year-old, just love on them, and if they're
Yeah.
willing to let you take them out in public, then,
Right.
great.
Right. Well, we're gonna put a comma there and let the PAX have the rest of the conversation. So as just we wrap up, Jim, I just appreciate your time. I just want to recognize
Absolutely,
you
buddy.
as a leader in our community, as a leader in Lake Forest, and as a dad. You inspire me, and I know you inspire us. I haven't seen you parent behind closed doors, but I've seen the way your kids love you and interact with you to know that you're someone I need to continue to learn from and listen to. And I appreciate your time today.
Hey man, I appreciate you. I appreciate you doing this for the PAX and Northeast Wake. I think this is such a valuable asset to, everybody learns differently and hears differently. Some people like to read, some people, big visual learners. So like
Mm,
having this opportunity to have these conversations, I think is really helpful. So I appreciate the
well,
work you're doing with this.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. Honored to have you on. Pax, we'll see you at the Q Source table.
All right. See you guys.
Yeah.